In this exercise, I want you to create some content from scratch using Photoshop, and I'll show you what we're going to end up with here. Basically, I want you to do 5 or 6 layers, 3 layers indicating sort of these hills, if you will, a foreground, a midground, and a background, and then a sky layer, and then one for the clouds. And if I scroll down, you'll see that this moves the quickest, this moves a bit slower, this moves a bit slower, this moves very slow, and the clouds move vertically at the same speed as the very slow sky, but they also move horizontally from left to right, as I will demonstrate here on the scroll. And that creates what's known as parallax scrolling. We're seeing a bit of junk at the bottom, and we could clean that up if we wanted to pursue this a little further. But basically I want you to do the 5 layers, parallax scrolling, but give the clouds a little bit of a sideways motion as well. Alright, so I will go over how to create this just briefly here. Let's go into Muse, and I'll just click on the settings of the various levels here. I do have a white sort of cover here because that background sky is quite large and part of the green of the bottom will show through, so I just actually covered that up with a little white thing, and there's no scroll effects or anything attached to it. It's just sitting there stuck to the page. But if we go to this foreground element and see quickly the settings here, 0, 0, and the trigger point's at 20 pixels, and that needs to be the same for all of them. And I'm starting this a little faster than the browser at 1.2, and then if I go to the next one, I just start to slow them down, otherwise all the settings are the same. This one's 0.8. This one here is 0.3, and then the sky, rather the sky if I click it up here, is 0.2. And the clouds, which are PNG, so they're definitely translucent and transparent, is matching the vertical of the sky at 0.2, but I'm also bringing it in at half speed at 0.5 from left to right. And that's what creates what looks like sideways motion, because it's moving up in conjunction with the sky, so it's synced up, in other words. So let's just take another quick look at that. Alright. And there you go. All right, backwards, forwards. And there we have some parallax scrolling. So let me go over to Photoshop and I'll give you the breakdown of what you'll need to do to create this. Here I've got a finished file. Basically each layer, the foreground layer is higher contrast, so I'll talk about that a little bit here. I'll quickly create another one maybe. And then the second one starts with a slightly lower contrast, and then the back one is more dull yet, and then we have the sky going from a light blue to a bit of a light aqua color, and the clouds, which you can see there, are translucent. And I'll just show you quickly. I just used the brush tool with a soft brush, and I varied my opacities from like 30% up to 50%, and I basically just clicked as if I was spraying. So I will create a new one here quickly. I'll just duplicate this file and I'll just merge the layers, and I'll just use that sort of as a template, if you will. So I'll create 5 new layers. You should name them as well. I'll just call this front, middle, back, sky, and clouds. Now I actually will reshuffle these. The front should be at the top, the clouds should be second from the bottom, the sky should be at the bottom. Think of the stacking order. So I guess I should have started this from the top, but no worries, and I can turn that off. I'll actually not be using that at all. So I can go from back to front. Why don't we just do it that way? Sky. Just pick some colors here. So pick up a fairly light blue, and as my background color, we'll pick a slightly lighter blue with a little bit of yellow in it. Alright, so very quickly a gradient from foreground color to background color. Boom. I'm going to skip the clouds for now, and I'll go to the front, and I'll pick a fairly dark red as my foreground color. And I can go with white as the background or a lighter version of that red. So I'll just go with white to make things quick and easy here. Then with one of my selection tools, and I'll just use the lasso tool and quickly draw something a little more dramatic. Each layer, as we get to the background, will be less dramatic. And then I drag around the edges, basically around to create a closed shape. And you can see that selection there. And we use our gradient tool, foreground and background, and I will start sort of a third of the way down to get that pure red. And I will drag beyond the edge to get that sort of gradient. So there's one. I can deselect. And I'll go to the middle ground now. Same idea, but maybe less dramatic. Just slightly. And then come all the way down, and then all the way up, around, close that shape. And this time I'll actually start higher, which instead of changing my colors every time, I'm just being less intense, so the most intense color is going to be outside of the selected area. And then I'll drag down with my shift key, and we'll try it about there. And you can see that is definitely not as dark, and as a result, it's lower in contrast. And if I wanted to try that again, I could redo it with the selection, but I'm just going to live with this, and I'll just make an even lighter one on the back layer. So once again, back layer. Now this one I'm going to just make shorter little bumps. And I am going pretty fast here, and then wrap that around here. Come back up, and again, even farther away. Drag down with my shift key, and there we have it. Now that might be almost a little too far away, so let me just try it again from here maybe. And that's a little too much the other way. So there's my happy medium. I'll just deselect that. And you know what, now that I'm looking at the sky, I'm going to go back to it. I'm going to hide all of these for a second. And let me sample that top color. I'm a eyedropper here. Now with the Alt key down, I can sample for background, but I'll also lighten it a bit here. There we go. And I'll ramp it sort of near the top area. So just foreground and background, shift key down, and more like that. Okay? I'll turn these layers back on. And as you can see there, I'm getting more what looks like a sky. Now let me just very quickly on the clouds layer, set this to white, go to my brush tool, and it is set to its softest setting, hardness set to 0. And with my right and left square bracket tool, I can increase and decrease the size. And I can also increase and decrease the opacity. I'll start at 50%, and I'm just clicking here. It compounds, it basically adds on. And just sort of randomly click around and change that size and make some clouds. Okay, so I'll just go over here and make some clouds. I'm at 50%. If I wanted to make them more subtle, I would lower that opacity and get even wispier here. So I'll actually decrease my brush size, and I'll make what looks like some clouds in the background here. Very far away. And maybe just one more large one here, up in the upper right. And I'll increase that to, say, 50%-ish. Okay, there we have some clouds. Let me just save that quickly. I'll just call it Parallax 3. I've done one already called 2. Okay, and here's a nice trick. Actually, let me delete that original layer. Boom. Save that again. And here's a trick where you can actually export all the layers as separate files. So this is quite nice. File, Export, Layers to Files. And just browse where you want to put those. So I'm actually going to create a new folder. And I'll call it Parallax 3 Images. Okay. And save them in there. And then click Run. Oh, I already had a preset. One thing I should have pointed out is you can set the formatting, and I did set them to PNG 24. Alright, so let me go back here to these settings quickly. Export, I went a little fast. Layers to Files. It's down here that you should choose PNG 24 most of the time. It's just the best quality, and it allows for translucency as well as transparency. Alright, so I'm going to cancel this because it's already done. And then, of course, I would go over to Muse. And if I was to start a new file, right, here we go. And I'll leave it as default, but I will set it to fixed width. And we can always change the picture or the page properties after the fact, but for now I'll just drag this down a bit. And I can go place. And I will grab all of them at once actually. I can just grab all of these here. Open. And it'll just let me drop them one at a time basically. Now I will need to move these around, mind you. And I can just change my view here. Let's click away. Basically. And I can see I do need to adjust my page size. But there it is in essence, so let me just go in and fix the page size. I'll just increase that by about 1,000, I guess. So 1,960. Okay, that's working for me. And there we have it. And then you would apply a motion scroll effect to each layer, as you've seen in the previous example. All right, so I want you to create that as your second parallax scrolling exercise. Once again, let me go over it here. And here's a finished version. Preview page in browser. And I did create an extra white rectangle in front of all of these that just stays fixed. But there's your parallax scrolling with the clouds not only moving slightly upwards in conjunction with the sky, but they're also moving to the right. Okay, so there is your parallax scrolling assignment number 2. And I would like you to create that in class today.